Suava, welcome back. The writers of revolutionary change often bore a heavy price for their outspokenness. Telling the truth could end your life. During enslavement, David Walker's book appealed to the colored citizens of the world, but in particular, and very expressly, to those of the United States, was considered the most radical and revolutionary writing of the 19th century. It advised whites to end enslavement immediately, but if whites were not forthcoming, it urged enslaved persons to rise up against the oppressor by any and all means necessary. Smuggled throughout the slaveocracy, just having his book on your person would have you jailed or worse. Published in 1829, the message was so frightening to slave owners that a bounty was placed on Walker's head. He was mysteriously murdered a year after its publication. Freedom fighters often founded and wrote in newspapers to advocate for freedom and equality during and after enslavement. Black newspapers traditionally advocated for liberation, sharing information, and advancing opportunities while recording current events for history's sake. Frederick Douglass's North Star and Marcus Garvey's Negro World are prime examples of a plethora of Black newspapers that sprung up all over the United States. Ida B. Wells was crowned Princess of the Press for her journalism on lynching. The Bermuda Recorder was a Black-owned newspaper founded by Misters Ruban, Augustus, Hughes, Martin, and Place. Published from 1925 to 1975, it was marketed as a newspaper in the interest of the colored people of Bermuda and featured journalist and broadcaster Ira Phillip, who wrote for the paper beginning in 1947. Claudia Jones was a journalist born in Trinidad whose parents migrated to the United States. She became a political activist, feminist, and Black nationalist who was deported in 1955 when she joined the Communist Party. After resettling in England, she joined the Communist Party of Great Britain and founded the first major Black newspaper in England, the West Indian Gazette, in 1958. The West Indian Gazette, Caribbean Times, and the Jamaican Gleaner all provided the latest news of home to Caribbean immigrants in Britain. South African Stephen Biko's writings and speeches were banned, but he wrote anyway, using the name Frank Talk, a clever play on words. Biko was silenced with a vicious beating, resulting in his death in a Pretoria jail cell in 1977. Various jurisdictions kept freedom-fighting organizations under surveillance, monitoring printed materials deemed dangerous to the status quo. Sometimes laws were passed to restrict or outright stop publications. The FBI regularly monitored the publications of the NAACP's Crisis Magazine, the Urban League's Messenger, and Garvey's Negro World. In Bermuda, it was against the law to use seditious language in printing materials, effectively shutting down distribution of the Nation of Islam's Final Call newspaper and ending publication of the Black Beret Cadre's publication. The list of publications that advocated for liberation and equality is quite extensive. Many have been digitized and are available for research. The urgent need to tell the truth of history is quite apparent when it comes to school curriculums. Colonized curricula are pervasive in the United States, Bermuda, some Caribbean islands, and even in neo-colonial countries in Africa. Our people have written a number of books about the retrogressive nature of our miseducation. Tragically, what Dr. Carter G. Woodson wrote in The Miseducation of the Negro in 1933 could have been written yesterday. Reawakening of the African Mind, written by my mentor, Dr. Asa G. Hilliard III, delineates what all of us must do in order to heal ourselves of the dis-ease of oppression and white supremacy. Baba Asa is crystal clear that we must read and study our own history, no longer waiting for somehow it to be magically given to us. That ain't gonna happen. In Bermuda, the struggle to accurately and forthrightly tell the unvarnished truth provides the backdrop to Bermuda's own Dr. Paulu Camareka-Fago's book, Me One, and Dr. Keto Swan's unflinching look at the struggle for freedom and liberation in his book, Black Power in Bermuda, The Struggle for Decolonization. He even mentions my program, Ashe, as one solution for decolonizing the minds of our children that was cut short, but is still very much needed today. Nevertheless, what I know for sure is that no other group of people depend on institutions and systems outside of our control to properly and forthrightly teach the history and culture of their people to their children. We must do no less. It is worth remembering that parents and grandparents are a child's first teachers, and as adults, it is up to us to learn and teach our babies. That is why I wrote Ashe, Bermuda History Stories for Children, and Ashe, Bermuda History for Young People. Illustrated by Bermudian artist Mrs. Angela Ming Bean, both books provide Bermuda's history of struggle and liberation, beginning at the beginning in the motherland and then moving through the history up to Bermuda's national heroes. We are the descendants of a great people, resourceful, resilient, and powerful. If we are to move past survival to a state of thriving, the story of our ancestors and the lessons of empowerment that are contained therein must be a knowledge requirement. But as I conclude this episode, let me return to the poets. The name of this poem is obvious. I got a poem stuck in my head. I went to bed last night reading my favorite thing, poetry. And all the poets jumped in my bed and into my head, and unbeknownst to me, they had a party, a jam session. There was Nikki and Sonia, Haki and Langston, Maya and Askia, Mddk and Catherine jamming in my head and in my bed. And next thing I know, I got a poem stuck in my head. It's 3 a.m. when I got this poem stuck in my head. I say, there's a poem stuck, running amok, out of control, won't let me sleep. I mean, this poem won't let me be. It's running and rhyming and screaming to be free. Like a baby whose mother is ready to give birth and wish it would happen at a more reasonable hour. It's 3:30 in the morning, and I've got this poem stuck in my head. So I woke up my husband and said, honey, there's a poem stuck in my head, and started to recite it. And then he said, I don't understand poetry, and went back to bed. Okay, poem, I'm up. Find a pen, some paper. The pen won't write, get a pencil instead. Use a poem that won't let me rest. Have you ever negotiated with a poem? And then I began to write, barely awake in the candlelight. This is a poem for those who write for a living, a poem for those who write to live. It's a poem for those who record dreams, ideas, and vision, those who write the details of a plan that will not fail, even as it is a poem for those who fail to plan. Damn, this poem is writing itself, trying to be unstuck, this poem in my head. This is a poem for children. Children who write, should write, need to write, better learn how to write. It's for citizens who have never taken the time to write. It's for those folk who need to get it right. Teachers, leaders, parents, preachers, lawyers, doctors, and freedom fighters. This is an empowerment poem. Write, vote, speak for freedom, justice, truth to power, having a voice and the courage to speak it. No peace without justice. Knowledge is power. Learn your history, live your culture. Africa equals excellence. This is a poem that needed to get here, out of my head and in your ear. It's a poem now, unstuck at 3:45 a.m. and told to you. Now, I'm going back to sleep. Well, what are you going to do? Hotep, I'm Mwalimu Melody Mishere Van Putten, and I am dropping the knowledge. Ashe.
Truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity. 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 Justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity. Truth, justice, righteousness.